Hey everyone, I'm Mark,
And I'm Alex.
and this is Final Stop for Final Fantasy Talks. Welcome everyone to episode 50. And by the way, dude, 50 episodes. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is. We've done so many at this point, but I mean, it's been fun. It's
Yes,
enjoyable.
it has, and hopefully many more to come. Regardless, we are going to continue on. We left off at the Mushroom Rock kind of command center. But Alex and I, we were talking, we're like, you know what, we haven't really discussed overdrives that much, if at all, other than just kind of glancing over some things here and there. So we're just gonna take, I don't know, a few moments here to kind of just go through some. We'll obviously we'll talk more as the game develops because, not a lot of different modes are even locked right now and different
Yeah.
things like that. So that's actually where we will start. Is if you do go to overdrive, on your characters and all that stuff, you can actually set the modes. And dude, I remember like the
Yeah.
first playthrough, I didn't even really kind of pay attention to this at all very much.
Me neither. And the other thing is, I think, like a lot of players, I'm guessing, let us know what you guys think about this, just in general about overdrives and what kind of modes, because I find that, generally speaking, for most of the players, I just either select warrior or slayer. In general, I guess just a breakdown for the different modes. It's all about how it charges your overdrive gauge. So everybody starts out with Stoic, which is just your standard, you get hit, you take damage,
Right.
charges your overdrive by a certain amount. And then you've got these other ones, like I was saying, Warrior, for example, charges your overdrive as you do damage, and Slayer will only charge your overdrive when you make a kill.
Yeah. All these different ones, they do charge at different rates. So you would think
Yeah,
that Slayer, okay, only will kill. Well, it charges a decent amount, though. And, the Stoic is, of course, the normal one. But if you get Warrior, and you will get Warrior pretty quickly with Kamari and Orin, especially, because each character will learn these all at different rates.
right.
For instance, Warrior, I think it's something like 100 attacks or something, and Orin will
Yeah,
learn Warrior, and Kamari's is like, 120. So they are the quickest. And, on the opposite
yeah,
end, Yuna is like somewhere like, I think like 300 or something. So,
yeah. And
obviously you're not going to be attacking with her that much.
right, exactly. That's the other thing is that kind of going on what you were saying. So, and I didn't really know much about this. Again, I think if you just play the game, you probably don't need to pay too much attention. But basically, the way that they're unlocked is based on the number of turns of specific actions required for that mode. So, like what you were saying, Warrior is based on the number of turns you attack, or Slayer is based on the number of turns that you actually kill something. So really, when it comes down to it, you don't have to pay too much attention to it unless you're really going for something specific,
Yeah.
because generally speaking, they're going to develop their modes depending on how you use that character anyway. So Waka, Tidus, and Orin are going to be killing a lot, so they usually get Slayer, Warrior pretty quickly. And then for me, Yuna and Lulu and all of them, they kind of get things like Comrade, which
Yeah.
is a weird one where, charges based on when other team members take damage.
And those are usually some of the ones you'll get first. There's a lot of them, and so we're not going to go through all those. As I just said, probably the ones that you're going to get first and fairly quickly by this point are Warrior and Healer, probably with Yuna if you've been using her
Yeah.
just to use, healing spells, which obviously it just charges your overdrive based on healing. Obviously, you do what you want. I would just probably recommend that for your damage dealers, like you prefer, Alex, is either Warrior or Slayer, because Stoic or these other ones, you're not always gonna get hit, but you will probably more than likely always be attacking with that character. So kind of whatever rate you want to charge that, and of course this is just overdrives. And well, we didn't really talk about overdrives either, which is
Yeah,
it's kind of
exactly.
interesting. We got Tidus's, which you get his in the very, very, very beginning. It's just the regular attack, and of course, it's like
Hmm.
the little meter where you gotta select it in the center, and
Yeah.
I do kind of like
Yeah.
that. There's some of them are different, so it kind of engages you
Yeah.
different ways. But probably by this point, if you've just been using overdrives as you get them rather than holding on to them, you might be pretty close to slice and dice.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So the overdrives are weird, and kind of like what you were saying, everybody's is different. And I think the only one that we've really talked about, which is kind of why we decided we needed to, talk about this, because especially with Tidus, we're getting to that point in the game where you're probably about to unlock Slice and Dice. I think other than that, we've just talked about Kamari and which
Yeah.
ones you want to lance it. But we'll run through each of the characters just real quick. First off, Tidus, he comes with obviously the very first one, and it's the thing like you were saying, Mark, where it's like a slider,
Yeah.
and the speed depends on which one it is, and you got to hit X in the middle. Basically, if you use his first overdrive, the what
Dude,
is
I
it
can't
called?
even
Spiral
remember.
cut, or yeah, whatever the first one is, the
I
spiral
was,
cut,
I was
then you
hoping
get
you'd remember.
slice and I totally forgot it. But basically, if you use that 10 times, you get Slice and Dice. If you use Slice and Dice 30 times, which is a heck of a lot, you
Yeah.
get Energy Rain. And then his ultimate overdrive, you actually have to use Energy Rain 80 times to get
Yes.
Blitz Ace.
So, to unlock them all, that is a total of 120 overdrives. That,
It's
when you
insane.
add up, you're like,
Yeah,
whoa, that's a lot. And it is, but of
yeah.
course, they unlock around the time they should, I mean, it would be nuts to farm out some of these really early on, but then you would also be a
Not
boss.
even, to be honest with you, they're not that great. So I feel like unless you have a real specific reason for it, maybe a
Sure.
challenge run. I mean, yeah, I got energy rain and stuff like that, and it's okay, but I wouldn't say it's worth grinding for.
Yeah. Yeah. Doing that specifically with intent to unlock it. Yeah. A little too
Yeah.
much work. And of course, next we got Orin, which I think we talked about his in the very beginning because you also get his during the first sin spawn battle, and you do the little kind of button combo that you got to do,
Combination, yeah.
and him we actually, I mean, you can't unlock any until a very long time, and so we won't go there right now. And and again we talked about Kamari's, his you'll just lance, and of course we're going through those as we go through the game, so nothing new there. Lulu's, hers is kind of interesting, and honestly, man, I don't think it's really that good in my opinion.
No,
Like, so
I don't care
if
for
you
it.
ever used it, you got to rotate the analog stick, and kind of on your point on the Steam version, because that's what I played on too. I feel
hmm
like it doesn't charge as quickly as the original
Yeah,
game
dude.
did.
No, seriously, I had that exact same problem where I used it the other day and I got like 3 hits
Yeah,
somehow, even though I was rotating the
dude,
analog
I'm
just like
telling
I
you,
used to with the
I'm going
PlayStation.
at the speed of light, man, and I am lucky if it gets 5. And I remember back in
Yeah,
the equivalent in the original game on PS2. I remember, man, we would get sometimes like 8. We'd be like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
we'd be so excited.
yeah.
And so right now, yeah, because for instance, Mihan High Road, I'd use a fire on an enemy. Let's just use an example, and it would do like 600 damage. If I would
hmm
do her overdrive, and maybe I'd get like 5 of the fires, they're only doing like 150. So
Yeah,
in the end, they're only actually doing maybe 300 damage more. And of course, you can't choose if there's multiple enemies. You can't choose where it hits, and so that's kind of the other thing that sucks. Is sometimes it'll just really spread out the damage, and you're like, well,
hmm
that was kind of sucky.
Yep. I mean, you bring up a good point there where you can't, like you said, it randomly hits any enemies that are on the screen, basically.
Yep.
And then on top of that, like you said, I mean, damage-wise, it seems to do about, I mean, I don't know exactly the damage formula, but it honestly seems to do about a third of the damage of the actual spell. So it
Yeah.
seems like it does a lot less. And then on top of that, the higher the level of spell, the more you have to rotate the analog to count as one additional spell, if you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
when you get to the higher level ones, you'd be lucky to bust out 5, 6
Yeah.
if you're lucky.
If you're
So
lucky.
it can be pretty good, but yeah, Lulu's, I'm kind of with you on that.
All right. Well, we have glazed over Yuna. We've talked about how Grand Summon is it's a pretty simple one for Yuna, where it just will automatically put whatever Aeon you select in an overdrive, which can be pretty cool. It's other than that, I feel it's kind of lackluster, just because it's like nothing it's nothing additional to the game. Like,
Yeah,
Aeons already have their overdrives, and so
yeah.
putting that just into instant, it can be incredibly helpful, of course, but it was just kind of like, I wish they would have given her something Una-specific, that's brand new, that was
Mhm.
outside of that. I don't know, maybe letting you use 2 Aeons or something. It would be a little overpowered, but, like,
That
something would be a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, I will say I guess the best use of Grand Summon for me has been if you go to if you were fighting Belgamine back in
Yeah.
Mihen and you hadn't charged their overdrives, that was probably the best use for it. So
And then now that we've talked about kind of the overdrives, let's go ahead and talk about one of the probably most overpowered overdrives in the game that you will, if you did Blitzball, you could get directly after Luca. So like
yeah,
right here, you could just go
yeah,
and man, that's of course Waka's slots in that's more specifically attack reels. So obviously you got the elemental reels where if you select them, it'll do the elemental type that you hopefully are able to line up.
exactly. Like Waka Elemental Reels, I hate it. It's really, really hard to get the right combination that you need.
Yes.
But basically, the way that all of his reels seem to work, except for maybe a couple down the road that we'll talk about later. But as far as like attack reels and elemental, it's like a slot machine. So you've got the three slots and they rotate at a certain speed. And for elemental, you get two slots of each element. So you get like two, yellow for lightning, two blue for water, blah, blah, blah. With attack reels, kind of it's different, but sort of the same where you get two hit, and then you get a miss, and then you get two one hit. But basically, attack reels works so that if you get it adds up the number of hits that you get. So if you land on two, two, and two, I just think
I think it
that's
multiplies,
a
doesn't
lot
it?
more. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's something like that because it's a lot for that. If you get them all in a row, basically, if you get two, 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 if you get one, 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 I did that the other day, and that literally is just three hits. So it's one of
yeah.
these things that it depends on what you get, but if you manage to get all twos across the three slots, that almost I think it's like 12 hits or somewhere
It's
around there. It's
yeah.
a lot. So
It's a lot. It is, and
and it does a
man,
lot of damage. It almost does like exactly what his attack power is.
yeah.
So
So kind of in comparison to Lulu's, where it's like, yeah, it does actually just hit that many times and it's full damage.
mhm.
So that of course is a very go-to one if you're ever in a tight situation and Waka's got an overdrive, bust out attack reels. And all right, so let's go back to Mushroom Rock Command Center. Where we left off was we were right outside the tent. We didn't quite go in. We talked to Waka. We talked to the dude that didn't know how the Wimp Classico was knighted. Here we go. So head into it, and it's pretty funny. You got it, gotta again. He's there, and he's just like, "Welcome to the command center." Blah, blah, blah. He's like very robotic. He's clearly
Yeah.
not happy. But Orin, man, leave it to Orin to put in someone's places when they're complaining, right?
Yeah, I mean, he always has the coolest quotes throughout the game, and this is just another one where basically you just drop some wisdom on him and says, if you want to prove yourself, first complete the task that you are given. And
Mm,
then, of course, Gata to that, he's like, huh.
yeah, life
He's not,
lessons right there. You
he's
want to
not
be
happy.
making millions and be the CEO? Well, I mean, you might have to start at the bottom. Prove
Yep.
yourself with the tasks you're given, and you will most likely climb up the ranks. That's just how it goes. But, Gata, of course, doesn't want that. He doesn't want to be there. But here's something that's very interesting. I was just going through. I never knew about this until I was, putting these notes together. After that, Gata will actually, you'll have free roam again, and he'll walk away. And I never did ever go actually talk to him. He'll say something. You'll have a couple options like, no, stay here and do your duty, or no, you should go fight. You got to talk to him again, and it's almost kind of like the same thing. It almost seems like it's the same, but the words are a little different. And if you once again tell him to go and fight, I didn't know that he goes and fights, man.
Yep. And we'll see what that means. But, it is kind of crazy that you have control over what happens here. And I didn't know that either, to be honest. Like, I think it was, way later after I watched certain walkthroughs and things like that on Final Fantasy X that I found out about this. Because I feel like most people playing, what'll happen is they won't go and talk to Gata
No,
again.
you'll just kind of move on with the story, and just keep going. And so if you do
Exactly.
that, and you go ahead and you go in, you're met with another guy whose name is Maester Keenock. So he's just another Maester. it's pretty funny. He sees Orin, he's like, "Oh, Orin, what's up, man?" He goes and gives him a hug, and Orin's just standing there stiff, like, "Get your hands off me, fat man."
Yeah, this is the first time we've seen Keenock really. I mean, I think they mentioned him before, if I'm not mistaken, but
Okay.
first time you actually get to see him, we kind of find out that him and Orin have some history.
Yeah, they clearly really know each other, or at least Keenock really knows him, and I think he during that time he was just like, "I'd be interested to know about where you've been the last 10 years." He's just kind of throwing out there, and
Yeah.
after that you're given a little bit more info too, I believe by Lulu. Lulu kind of comes over and she's like, "Maester Keenock. He's the leader of the warrior monks, but he's the leader of the warrior monks in the Crusader, so he's the one that leads it." And they give a
Yeah.
little snippet that he's one of the four. So there's apparently four maesters. We've met three with Micah, Seymour Butts, and Keenock, and so there's a fourth one floating out there somewhere, but he gives a really interesting perspective to this operation, man, and it doesn't sound too rosy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they know that it's not going to work. And so he's just like, "Yeah, we'll let them dream a little bit longer."
After listening to what Seymour was saying, right? I don't know. He was kind of behind it and all that. And then you get this from Keenock. And so, like, I don't know, anyone I think with the brain be like, so why are we doing this then? What is the point of this operation if the leaders from the get-go know it won't work? Like, what? They're literally just sending people to die for no reason whatsoever if it's not going to do anything. But, that
Yeah,
Keenock,
and
a maester.
and I love that part too because then in the background, Keenock's like, "I heard that, Orin.
He's like 10
Where
feet
have you
away.
been?" Yeah, exactly. He's like right there, and that's when he's just like, "Where have you been the last 10 years, and what have you been doing?"
Yeah. Kind of the interesting thing, at least I thought it was interesting in that. And he's like, "Tell me this, did you see Xanarkand?" And
Yeah, that
that
that is
is, you don't quite know, because we know, just based on the story, that there are two Xanarkands, right? There's the one that Tidus is from, which is somehow
right.
separated by I don't know, a multi-dimension thing here. And then there's the ruined one, the one that's ruined, which is right now in Spira. And so you're kind of wondering what he means, or at least I am, because surely they know. I mean, Braska defeated Sin, so they know that Orin went to Xanarkand. So
But
it's kind of like
yeah,
he's not. It doesn't seem like he's talking about that ruined city, Xanarkand.
but I don't know because the one thing I always think is that we'll get into all this stuff later as well because there's a lot of development on the story, but it kind of seems like they haven't talked since he defeated. But you're right. I mean, because he knows that Braska defeated Sin, so
Yeah,
surely he would assume that he has seen Anakin.
yeah,
That's a good question. I'll have to think about that though.
yeah. Well, at this point, you are given kind of free reign. You can start the attack by talking to one of the Crusaders there, but you're allowed to walk around. You can, of course, do it, everything. Really, the only thing additional is just in this kind of tent area, there's a mega potion and a serene bracer. And then, whenever you're ready, go ahead and start the attack. But I was laughing at this. It's so funny because they're like, they have the cage with the sin spawn, and you learn the whole point now of the sin spawn is that sin always returns for its sin spawn, as we kind of learned from Kilika also. And so they're like, we're gonna encourage it to call out to sin, and it's funny because Orin's like, you don't have to, man, don't worry, he's coming. But
Yeah.
they're like, I don't know, they're like electrifying it, and me, it's like, man, maybe you might have encouraged it a little too much, man. The thing busts out, like, like maybe you should have just left it alone.
Yeah, and the best part is everybody runs away except for, of course, the team. So
These
you're
dudes
just
are
left there to
Crusaders,
fight this thing.
man. And they're running from Sin Spawn. Like, what was?
Yeah,
Gosh, these guys are pitiful.
yeah. But also that guy that said, we're going to encourage him. His voice actor's so funny because he also is like, Sin always returns for its spawn.
Yeah.
You know?
It's so, well, it does bust out. I don't know. I guess it metamorphosized into each other because there were a bunch of separate Sin
Little
Spawn, I
pieces,
thought
yeah,
it was.
segments.
And so, I don't know. I guess it all attached to each other. And here you go. So we got a boss.
Sin spawn Gui, or GUI. Depends on how
Or
you say
GUI,
it. GUI,
the
GUI,
user
GUI.
interface.
However you want to say it. So this one is a pretty interesting boss because I think actually yeah, I mean I don't think definitely this is the first boss like you've got multiple targets
Okay.
segmented, right?
Yeah.
So you've got two arms, they're both armored, both have 800 HP each. You've got the overall body, which is like a centipede kind of thing
Yeah.
looking. It's crazy. But anyways, it has 12,000 health, which is insane. You've got the head, which has about 4,000, and it's kind of unique in the way that you need to fight it.
Yeah, the whole point of the arms is they will actually regenerate, and so there's no real point to focus on them other than taking them out with whatever you can, because they will, if you try to attack the body with physical attacks when the arms are up, they kind of just they fold in and they kind of absorb
They
the damage,
protect it.
so to speak.
Yep.
And so if you have a lot of physical damage, you'll want to go ahead and just take out the arms first. They will regenerate though, so that's kind of the only thing.
And I mean, as far as strategy, again, like I don't know about you, man, but literally a lot of these battles, I just use. It's basically the same thing. It's always haste with Tidus. I'll put that on himself or Waka or Ornn or somebody like that, and then I'll try to get cheer times 3 to 5 on him. And at that point, I mean, depending on how what sphere level your Ornn is, but he can take out those arms in a couple of hits
Yep.
and then just have Waka work on the head because the head is really annoying in that if you leave it alone, so it just sits there and uses thunder, which isn't a big deal, but if you leave it alone, it starts moving, quote unquote, moving suspiciously is what
Huh.
it says in
Yeah,
the
which
text box.
okay, hold on. It's moving up there, and these guardians are so
Yeah.
familiar with synth spawn. They're like, hold up, that head's moving pretty suspiciously right now.
What what does this mean? I have no
What does
idea.
that mean?
Yeah, and basically, if you leave it alone, it'll use an attack called Venom on one character, which does a pretty good amount of damage. I think it does a couple of hundred at least,
Yeah,
and
I
it
think it's around
poisons them.
400.
So
But
yeah,
yeah, poison. And so you just don't. It's completely avoidable if you just simply hit it when it moves, and that's all you need to do. You could technically kill it, and it'll just kind of be dead, so to speak. It'll just be there. It won't regenerate, but it's got
yeah,
4,000
that
health,
one
and so
wasn't.
it's kind of like that's 4,000 you could have done to the body. Of course, magic will hit any of these. So if you have Lulu in, you can just go to town on the body, which is all I did. She had fire on mine, so I just kept firing off fire spells and stuff. But other than that, it is pretty straightforward. It's not that difficult of a battle, in my opinion. I don't really ever have too much issue as long as you can just. For me, it's just mainly just hitting that head when it moves suspiciously, is getting that time in, because otherwise, then you gotta, deal with the extra bit of damage, and then you gotta deal with poison on top of that and stuff.
Yeah. I will say, this is like the first serious battle if you're doing something like a no sphere grid run, which I've seen. I've never actually tried it because it's just really, really crazy. But I've seen some stuff on this, and this one, he's just got so much health and things
Yeah,
like that. So this is
12,000.
kind of the part in the game, yeah, where the bosses really start getting serious. And same with the random encounters.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And just to go real quick to the body too. The body will just use punch, which it actually does quite a bit of damage. It's like I
It
think
does like
maybe
500.
yeah, it's anywhere between maybe 500 to 700. I think got hit for and stuff, and so that
Yeah,
does a lot.
depending on your defense.
And then the one that actually is kind of the most dangerous in my opinion is Demi, and that's if everyone's topped off. You know what I mean? Because that does a four,
Hmm.
so that could easily do another 400 to 500, but to everyone. And so, other than that, if they're low, then it does almost nothing, and you're like, yeah, that's cool. But
The danger is he'll use Demi on you a couple times and then he'll follow it up with a punch.
yeah,
So keep everybody healed up as best you can.
but once you do defeat it, you get tossed into a cinematic where now you see this big old blob in the ocean coming up. And other than the cinematic that we saw at Kilika, where you really kind of did get to see Sin a lot more, this one I think is even further because, nothing's moving, nothing's going on. It's just really focused on it. And it's weird, man. It's got this like moving armor around it, kind of. It looks
Yeah.
like it's almost like ripples going across it all the time. And based on what pops off, it does kind of look like maybe Sin scale. They also kind of have like tails though and stuff. So I don't know. It's really
Yeah.
interesting, but the Al Bhed are going crazy, or Crusaders rather are. They're firing their cannons, and it's just it's like it's not doing anything whatsoever.
Yeah.
If anything, it's actually doing harm because it looks like it's just knocking off all of those sin scale things.
Exactly. And then you see that part where they're all, the Chocobo Knights and the Crusaders are all fighting with the the Sin Spawn or the Sin Scale or whatever, basically like what you're saying, every time they hit it with a cannon shell, it just knocks off more of these little Sin Spawn,
Yeah.
and they're just sitting there on the beach fighting it and everything like that. Really, at this point in the game, we don't even really know that much about what Sin actually is.
Yeah.
You know, it's just this giant thing that's terrorizing Spira. We know that the summoners are charged to defeat it, and the Crusaders fight it, and all of these different things. But it's interesting because at this point, you know, you just don't know that much about it.
Yeah, you just know it's a giant monster essentially, and after this, it kind of goes to just a little screen. It has Orin, and he's like, watch out. And I'm just like, gosh, man,
That part.
how did he knew? Yeah, he just knew. It's like, okay, I see you, Jed. I see you. Because right
Yeah, they're
after,
just standing there.
yeah, they're standing there. They're like, watch out. So they
Just
run
watching.
away. Somehow they get far enough away from this, which makes no sense. We were at the command center. It goes to another cinematic right back to Sin, and dude, he kicks it up a notch because now he's got like literally like a force field around him. Then he like shoots it out, man, and oh, dude, it's nuts. It just. What hope do these guys have against this guy?
Yeah,
Man,
I
he
know.
literally shot out a force field, and it just poofed. It just made everything into little black pixel dust. Just poof. And it was like,
Yeah.
okay,
It
how are we supposed to defeat that?
it like eviscerates everybody. It's crazy. It's just they basically just get like evaporated or something,
Yeah.
you know. That's the thing, and they were just sitting there fighting the Sin Spawn. They weren't even actually really fighting Sin at that point. So now we kind of see what Keenock was talking about. They knew. They're like, yeah, this ain't gonna work.
So that kind of ends there with Sin and on the beach and stuff. This wave goes out. We see it kill pretty much like all the chocobos and their knights, all the soldiers on the ground. I mean, it also takes out the Sin Spawn. Not that that's a big deal, but wipes out everything. And it comes to, I think, with Yuna, right? And she's looking around.
Yeah. She wakes up. She got like knocked
Oh,
out or
man.
something like that.
And you look
She wakes
over,
up.
and she's like, "Man, who's that beefcake over there?" And you're like, "Oh, it's Seymour. He's having an arm wrestling match with Sinspawn Gui because, dude, Sinspawn's little arms are folded on his chest, and Seymour's just there like no big deal, just holding him back, like, yeah." Dude,
Yeah, it's the
no
look on his
way,
face,
no
too.
way! I don't
He's-
believe it. I won't accept that he did this.
It's the look on his face too, because it kind of like zooms in on his face, and
like,
he's just perfectly calm. He's like, "Yep,
He's
I got this,
smirking.
man. You ain't going nowhere right now."
Yeah, he's like, I got you. And then what's worse is like at the end of it, not only that he's having an arm wrestling match, but then he literally pushes it back. He's like, huh, he pushes it, and the thing moves back like 20 feet. You're like, how in the world? Like, what is
Yeah.
this guy made out of, man? He's got like bones out
Yeah.
of titanium.
And this is the best part too, because this is just another really cool part in the story, because then he's just like, "Stand back, Lady Una,"
Yeah.
as she's getting out. So yeah, this is an insane fight. We actually get to use Seymour.
It's the same boss. It's pretty much the same exact process. He has much less health though. It has 6,000 health, so about half of it.
And one of the coolest boss themes right here. It's called Challenge. Plays in some of the biggest boss battles in the game, so
Yeah.
this one you'll hear quite a few times, but it's awesome.
It is. And I would say this fight is probably the coolest your very first playthrough, right? Because chances are,
Yeah.
I remember, I think maybe it was ours or maybe we were separate and playing together or doing whatever. But, at this point, I usually never did have tier 2 magic, right? Lulu doesn't have the auras and stuff. And so when you get Seymour and you see there, you're like, oh, heck yeah. He's got Fyra, Blizzara, Thundara, Watara, and I mean, honestly, this is like test them all out, see what they're like, because it's really cool. They do about like 1,200 damage also, so they're hitting
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, this is where you get to feel like a total boss, because you could just overkill the arms instantly. And on top of that, dude's got 999 MP. I mean, it's
Yeah, he
hilarious.
does.
And the other cool thing about this right here that I didn't know about for a while is this is the only time in the game that you can get Seymour's overdrive. And he's obviously just in stoic mode, so you just basically have to let it charge all the way. But
Sure.
if you do, you get to see it. It's called Requiem. It looks really awesome. It kind of looks like an attack that we'll talk about later because it's an Aeon attack. But anyways, it does a ton of damage, and it's the only time you get to see it.
Yeah. Orin is also there, so Orin's there. For me, I'm only using, Yuna, Lulu, and Kamari, and so my Orin is completely non-developed. He was only doing like 270, so I pretty much just had to rely on Seymour blasting away the body.
It's pretty much all Seymour in this one, yeah.
Yeah, it is. And the interesting thing is, so when this battle ends, now you'll get to experience it, because if you're like maybe like me in the first few, you defeat them the first time, you're like, wow, what the heck, man? Where's my experience? But it waits till after the second time, and then it comes pouring in, especially if you get overkill and stuff. Interesting enough, there is Seymour, and he gets experience.
Yeah, but the funniest thing about Seymour is he must have been like level 1, because he gets like 6 sphere levels every single time out of this. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And I don't
Meanwhile,
know.
the rest,
It's very interesting that they did this, because it was almost like they were trying to do a fake out with us, like, hey, you get Seymour now, because why
yeah,
else would he get experience with your party? I mean, that's a
right.
really weird way of doing it, and yeah, and then he doesn't join your party, but
I think it's a really cool idea, because it's sort of like, I mean, at this point, we don't really know exactly where Seymour stands.
sure. If you do win, you will get a nice handful of level 1 key spheres. So, they're kind of starting to flow in. We were really excited to get our first one last episode. I think maybe even now, all of a sudden, we got a ton. If you overkill, you'll actually get 6 of them.
At this point, basically, the level 1s aren't even an issue anymore.
No.
You should have enough. You've got probably about 5 if you've gotten the 2 from Mihen and 3 from this guy, so.
Yep. And on that point, don't shy away from using them either. I mean, some of the little inlets in the sphere grids for players that are unlocked pretty early on level 1s, you might pass by them the first couple times if you only have like 1 or 2, but now I'd say go for them, because it's not like anything amazing, but just to kind of give a little, and what else are you going to do with these, key spheres?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then as far as armors, he kind of sucks as a boss. He only gives you, usually what I get is some sort of armor with sleep ward and no extra slots, or he can give you what's a little bit better, sleep touch weapons, so like lullaby steel, I think is one for Tidus, and
Right, well, after that battle, it goes to, once again, one more cinematic, man. We're getting tons. You got, I don't know, we didn't notice it before, at least I didn't, but there's like this giant like laser beam thing that's right next to Sin's, and like Sora's like, oh, hey, when'd that get here? And like the Al Bhed, or, he's having to use like 4 different aiming mechanisms, because the thing's pretty small to hit, Sin's pretty small. You got to really aim at it. He's like, it's like, you're wasting time, man. What are you doing? Like, just fire it.
I like how they're like struggling with it too. He's like, oh my god, I gotta aim this thing, and then he's got like this giant button there. He just slams it with his fist, and then he sets like the fire button.
And then he's like pressing it, like, crap, I broke it. It's like, what? Yeah, that guy's like, why'd you hit it? I don't know, and stuff. It is a pretty cool moment, because the thing is like, yeah, it's going. He has his force field up, Sin does, and so it's not really kind of going through. Just like any show or movie in the world, naturally, you never start at full power. Why would you ever do that? Like, you wait until the last quarter mile before you shift into your last gear, right? You wait until you're almost dead before you're like, oh, we can turn up the power on this thing. So they turn up the power on it, and then it actually looks like it might. It's almost kind of like just displacement, right? The shield doesn't, it's not like it's necessarily like punching through the shield. The shield just kind of, I don't know, displaces that part in the shield and then fires it off, and just, that was that.
It cuts over to Yuna and Seymour standing there just like, oh my god.
Yeah. And I had to say, man, after watching all this again, and just, because when we put it together for podcasts, I'm thinking a lot more about this stuff, I'm much more intentional about the story, and it's just, this was pathetic. Like, is this seriously how they've been fighting Sin this whole time? No wonder they can't beat it, because they're a bunch of morons. Like, okay, let's start this giant operation to kill Sin. All right, how many people we got?
Ouch.
15? Great, let's go with it. How many cannons? We got 10 cannons, and sir, there's 30 in storage. Nah, 10's good enough. We'll just bring 10. Like, what? They know what Sin is capable of, and this operation is like this big giant thing and all that. And it was pitiful, man. It was pitiful.
Well,
on top of that, this laser, dude, they didn't fire until everyone else was dead. Shouldn't you do everything at once? I mean, this is kind of basic common sense.
Well, they have Classico. So you're
Yeah. Yeah.
underestimating them. They have the Chocobo Knights, and there's at least 3 of them. So
Yeah. Well, you're kind of left with Tidus now. You're on the beach and you get to, you see all this destruction and death and all that stuff.
Yeah,
You
this
can
part's
go
really
around
sad.
and interact with the bodies, and
Yeah,
it'll just comment on maybe how they're laying or what they look like, but all of them are, they're all lifeless, they're all dead, which is kind of interesting because apparently I guess that force field did not just disintegrate everything. It looked like it
I
did,
guess not,
but
yeah.
I guess it just
No,
maybe
that
didn't reach that far off the beach or something.
that's a good point, but this is, like, really I don't know, I think they did a really good job of, you just got through a bunch of really intense scenes, and the music matched the scenes where it was really kind of intense and high energy and things like that, or kind of, like, apprehensive.
Yeah.
And then you get to this part, and it's just sobering, it's playing the Hymn of the Faith. Basically, the beach is just littered with, dead bodies.
Yeah, and the way to progress this is if you go on the back, you'll find Gata there, and he's either alive, and he's like what? He's just like basically having a mental breakdown, which of course, I
Yeah,
mean,
like, "What's going
yeah,
on?"
he's screaming, or and that's what I've always experienced, right? That's what I've always
Mhm.
experienced has been that until this time, until I learned that if you did talk to him twice and tell him, you'll see it in his body. He's saying there, and Tidus is like Gata, and kind of like Gata, and then his
And then he
body just
just slumps
topples over,
over.
and he starts
Yeah,
to kind of like, oh my gosh, Gata's dead, and yeah. So if you do
yeah.
that, if you talk to him twice and convince him to go down, you're partially responsible for killing Gata, but
Dude,
I
that would
take
be
that with
pretty
pride.
heavy, right?
Gotta
See, a lot
die,
of people would.
yes.
Yeah, a lot of people really don't like Gata, so I can understand that. And yeah, as it turns out, if you wanna, send Gata to his demise, you can actually do that. Just talk to him twice and tell him to go, and then
So once you do that though, it does go back to one more cinematic with Sin, and this one's pretty short. All it is like it puts like its moving armor back on, and it just turns around and goes. And you got one of the kind of most like what are you doing pointless moments in the game where Tyler's like, don't you run away from me. It's like I don't think he's running away from you, buddy. Like he just wiped out everyone. Why would great, now I gotta confront my kid out of all things. Psh, I'm out of here, I mean, come on.
ain't nobody got to deal with that. And yeah, so this is kind of crazy because you just start swimming after him. Because of course, this is the first time we've seen Sin since we found out that Sin is Jecht.
Yes.
And so yeah, he's got his daddy issues
He's got
flaring
his
up
daddy
again.
issues. And it's pretty interesting because then it does go to Yuna. She's like, I'll summon. And like Seymour's just being the realistic one. He's like, it won't matter, man. She's like,
Yeah.
oh, I gotta do something. He's like, you can't. And it's like, yeah, you
Yeah,
really
yeah.
can't. We have Valfor or Ifrit. I don't think they're gonna be strong enough. But
I know. I love the way he does that too. It's like she continues to try and summon. He's just like, "You can't."
yeah,
It's like, "Oh, well, all right. Well, now that you've said it that strongly, then I guess,
yeah, I
that's
guess I'm
it."
gonna do it anyways. And so she starts doing it. Of course, nothing comes out of it, but you can understand everyone's frustrations with this. But they were kind of forewarned by Keenock and all that. But it will go back then to Tidus. I don't know why I kept swimming that day, or it's something like that. But it
Yeah, yeah.
goes to this weird like dream. It kind of does that where, it does that motion and I don't know, man. It's a weird scene. If you're seeing this for the first time too, it might somewhat resemble some other things we've seen to this point with other visions we've seen.
Yeah.
But like there's this weird kind of like tree that has this giant like blue gem in it or something. It does look like all of the Crusaders who just recently dead, like their ghosts are there. If Gata was one of them, you actually do see Gata as well, and so that's
Yeah.
what kind of
Or
gives you
or you
that.
see exactly. Or you see Luzu, which is really crazy, kind of walking by.
Yep.
Yeah, this is one of those things. Did he get too close to Sid again? Is this Sin's toxin?
Yeah, and it goes to another secondary one, which I kind of like this. You're in Xanarkin now, and you can tell it's like a young Tidus, a little kid. They say you just drink too much. His weird little kid voice I try to make fun of and stuff. And basically he's just calling Jet out. He's like, you're drunk now, you're retired from
Yeah.
Blitzball. Dude, I love it though, because, Jet's just kind of like, yeah, so what? I'm a drunk, and he's like, I'm still the best. He's like, no one can beat me.
Yes.
I'm still
Yeah,
the
and
best.
And he has one of the best lines ever. I actually use this all the time. Why do today what you can leave for tomorrow?
But you said you can. It was like, what? Stop drinking today, and he's like, huh? Why?
Yeah,
What I do today, what you can leave for tomorrow.
I love that. That's a classic quote. Interesting one. It gives you a lot more background into the issues, into why he hates Jecht
Yeah,
and those
which
types of
isn't
things.
isn't hard to see. I mean, just
Right.
based on what we've been shown, you could tell that Jed is a complete jerk, just self-absorbed, absolute huge ego jerk and stuff. And so
I'm still
I'm
best.
still the best. It's kind of interesting now if you think of these in relation. Now we know that Sin is Jet, and so these visions that Tidus gets, it's kind of, you can kind of start to piece them together, like, okay, well, anytime he's coming near Sin, he's getting these kind of memories and these visions,
Mhm.
and most often they're when he was a kid and Jet's there. And so this kind of pieces together what Oren said was like, surely you felt him when you were near, and all this different stuff. And so we're kind of just getting this whole idea that Sin is Jet just compounded and built up and like just supported, and you're like, yeah, no, it is for sure.
Exactly. And then after that, pretty much you're back on the beach. I think you have control with Titus at this point. I think you just basically go over, you sort of run to the left, and then there's a couple of scenes between Oron and Keenock. Oron says something like, leaving so soon?
Yeah.
After everything that's happened, they're bouncing.
It's like, all right, well, now that we just killed all of our Crusaders, see you later. And
Yeah, and he also says too, there's an interesting part where he says the faithful live on, right? Something like that. Basically the ones that use Machina. It was
yes,
exactly what Enoch wanted.
yeah, the faithful live on while the heretics or whatever, perish, kind of a deal. And essentially, just a dig at, they used Machina and they're dead, but oh, somehow the High Maester's alive. Wow, imagine how that happened, and then there's another one. There's actually, it's kind of interesting between Yuna and Seymour. Seymour's just, just saying kind of good stuff, blah blah blah. And then he's like, Lady Yuna, take me as your pillar, as Lady Yunaliska did with Lord Zion. Okay, and you can tell by her face, she's like, okay,
Right. And this is interesting. I like the way the game foreshadows like this. This is pretty cool, especially, once you get through it, obviously, once you know the story. So this is the first time that you hear the name Lady Yunaliska.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, was
Yeah.
was
Who?
Yuna named after Yunaliska?
Yeah.
And these types of things, and obviously you don't even know who they are. We're gonna find out a lot more about that, and it'll actually be a pretty crucial part of the story.
Yes. So you're given free roam again. You can talk to most people. Most people don't say much other than like, Waka's like, this is what you get when you ignore the teachings, kind of a deal. And you get that kind of feeling from most people. If you do
Yeah,
go talk
Lulu
to
talks
Oron,
about
he'll basically, he's just really driving home the point. He's like, sin is Jet, and then Tidus even asks, he's like, so you're saying he came here and killed all these people just to see me? And Oren's like, yeah, exactly. So
what he does.
you could see that that's who he is. That's what he is now. He just kills
Uh-huh.
and he destroys, and he's like, he wants you to stop him.
Exactly. This is supposed to be that motivation. And then also on top of that, so if you go talk to Lulu, she of course is asking about the toxin again. Why is it that like nobody else is affected by toxin but Titus? I don't understand that. I mean, weren't they close
Yeah.
enough to be affected by toxin? I'm not sure.
Well, no, that extra 100 feet that he swam into the ocean, that was it right there. That was close enough. Yeah, it is pretty.
Yeah.
It's kind of like one of those plot loopholes, where it's like, it doesn't make much sense. Some people are affected, some aren't, and so maybe that's just
They
how it is. Is that some are and some aren't? I don't know. Yeah. So on your way out, Owaka is over there. It's kind of funny because I put in like asterisks slightly. He feels slightly guilty because that's it. He's not guilty at all. You could tell he's like, I almost feel
Yeah,
sorry for taking all their money from him. He
he's a
doesn't
businessman.
he doesn't have much at all. It's just items. The only thing is just, if you are low or empty on softs, you might want to just pick up a few. Probably don't need a whole lot, but just, you will start to encounter some petrification here pretty soon, and so you might want those. But, it goes without saying, most of the items, I generally just keep a stock of like at least 10 of all of them anyways, just to have on hand. So that's always a pretty good rule of thumb, especially since it's all cheap.
And then once you're done with that, there's basically you can go and talk to Shalinda. She's up there sort of tending the wounded and things like that. And I believe she'll give you a free heal again at this point if you really
Yes.
need it, which you probably don't
Makes no
because,
sense. There's
you know,
there's a save sphere right there. Why
there's
did
a
they?
safe throw right there, yeah, and no random encounters. So I don't know, but you can talk to her, you can talk to the wounded. They're basically all talking about how their commanders are gone now and you know they shouldn't have gone against Yevon in the
Yep.
teachings.
So if we head on forward, we are at the Djose High Road. As you enter it, Yuna says something like, hey, we're gonna go do this, continue, blah blah, and she kind of seems a little bit more chipper, right? And so
Yeah.
Tidus kind of makes the comment. Everyone's walking, everyone's away. So I think he almost kind of said it to himself. He didn't know that Kamari was right behind him, and he was like, wow, she seems okay, kind of a deal. And Kamari's like,
Yeah.
Yuna, happy. You not be strong. I don't know, but it's like he finally talks, and it's like, whoa, all right, you can talk, man. He's like, so what?
Kamari's
Don't
so
worry, be happy. And so they talk about the whole smile, and so Tidus is like, come on, let me see it.
Yeah, yeah.
Kamari
Exactly.
smiles. Sad.
It's that's one of my favorite parts. I think the voice actor for Tidus, he really nailed it right there, the way he says that, because it is like it's sort of drawn out. It's like sad.
He's like, yeah, because it looks like he's growling. I mean, he's a Ronso, he pretty much does have a snarl, but yeah, it's like, whoa, that's terrible, man. You got to work on that.
Yeah,
You learn that Kamari can in fact talk. He's just been silent for whatever reason. I don't know.
Yep.
But here you go. Now you're able to walk around. We'll get to most things as usual. We'll just start out with some enemies. We'll go through them pretty quick because it's nothing crazy. There's a Garm, which is just the usual wolf type enemy, kind of agile and fast. It is weak to thunder and fire. And then just the main thing as they're all just going to start, like pretty much most enemies these days are just going to start to have these chances on hit, chance for sleep and silence.
Bite Bug, a little bit of a throwback to Final Fantasy VIII. I don't know if there's been another Final Fantasy with Bite Bug, but yeah, that's what that made me think of. And then this one, you can kill it with both magic. It's got pretty low magic defense, so ice will overkill it more than likely, or just Waka. The B-type enemies, of course, just start basically inflicting poison on hit or have a chance to.
And usual just snow flan this time, so weak to fire, nothing interesting about these. The bunyip, or I like to say the bunyip.
Bunyip?
It's just one of those armored shell things, so nothing too crazy, just need piercing. It's also weak to blizzard water, so nothing new there.
The far end of the high road, there's kind of some rare enemies. There's a bird type enemy here actually, but it's not that easy to encounter, so you may or may not come across it. It's called a Cymurg, and it's basically just, bird type, so it's hard to hit, weak to fire, can cause darkness on hit, I believe.
And then the last one that's at least in this first area of Djose is the Basilisk, and I don't think it's too dangerous, but it's just it can cause. It's the one that can cause petrify. So you'll definitely want to lance in it with Kamari for Stone Breath, and then its ability is Stone Gaze, and it can cause petrify. And just of course something to just remember, keep in mind with petrify is that if all members get petrified, it's just instant game over. That's it.
Right, and another thing with petrify too that can happen is, let's say a character does get petrified, you want to heal that as quickly as possible, because I'm not entirely sure how this works, but I think sometimes if they get hit with a physical attack after they're petrified, they can actually shatter.
Yeah, and then they're just removed.
Then they're just removed, yeah, you can't revive them or anything like that, so watch out for stuff like that.
And then also, especially in this first kind of half, you will most likely just encounter many of the same Mushroom Rock enemies. It'll be probably a mix between a battle of them, maybe some new ones, but it's kind of all over the place. But as usual, as you're going up and down, or, hopefully if you're able to just catch them, all these people like to kind of walk the same direction at the beginning. So you might need to catch some of them, but talk to them. You'll get some items as usual. Some of the interesting things they say, which I don't understand, is they'll be like, they talk about how they're excommunicated now. How weren't they before? I mean, the way that Chappu died was he used Forbidden Machina. How haven't they been? Are they like, all right, your standard waiting period of 5 years is up. You're now back in the church. Hello. Oh, you guys did another operation? Excommunicated. We'll see you in 5 more years. I mean, what? How are they not excommunicated?
I don't know, it's like what they did was so egregious that was the final straw or something like that, I'm not
Yeah.
sure, they never explained it, but yeah, I mean, of course, they're not in the good graces of the church at this point, right? Using the forbidden machina, like you
Mm,
said, and, they just totally failed Operation Meehan, and so now they're all sort of running back to the church, and so, yeah, along the way, you just go and talk to them, they're all sort of periodically stopping and praying and doing
yeah.
stuff like that. But you get some pretty crazy stuff from some of these. For example, right at the beginning, if you actually just stand still and there's a guy that's wearing sort of like purplish helmet and
Yeah.
purple vest, this guy gives you probably one of the best items that an NPC can give you in the whole game. It's a soft ring for Yuna that has stone proof and one extra slot. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's stone proof. You know, you might have ward,
Yeah,
stone ward up to this
right.
point, but this is stone proof, and so
Right, exactly. So
especially
100%.
yeah, and especially for this area with the basilisk, it's great. I mean, that is your 100% safety for no game overs with petrify, right? If you have that on Yuna, because especially with her, then she could just use Asuna. Some other items you'll get are high potions, ether, mega potion. You will get a variable steel, which this one, it does only have strength plus 3% on it, which that's, you know, that's as low as it gets. But it does have 3 other empty slots. So
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is about to possibly be very useful for you. Anytime you get empty slots, it's always kind of a good thing. You know, you kind of want more empty slots than not.
Yeah.
There's a treasure chest. Also, if you go down, it's about halfway down. It has a phoenix down ×2 in it. But this is the big one, man. This one is probably one of the ones I missed the most. Is that right across? So on the other end, this is on the left. The phoenix downs are on the left. On the right,
Mhm.
near kind of the coast, there's this big pillar. It's like right across. Right behind
Yeah.
that is an Al Bhed Primer 11. You will not be able to see it, right? And so it's really hard to see. It's also kind of funny side note. About this point, you'll see Lucille. So you find out Lucille did Elma and Classico. They all survived this somehow. And Lucille's running on her chocobo, and it's just hilarious because you see Elma and Classico just trying to chase behind her because they don't have one. They're just running. They're like, ah. You know?
Yep, yep. Apparently all of the chocobos, all 3 of them, I guess, are gone at this point.
Yes.
But yeah, the Al Bhed primers are really hard to find. That's a tough one. And then if you keep going further down, there's another chest with a totally useless piece of equipment in it, a
Yeah.
bright bangle. I don't
I
even
know.
understand this. Like, it's for Lulu and it's Dark Ward. Why?
Yeah.
Just,
It's in a chest, so it's not like, you know, they intentionally wanted
it's
to give you that
intentional,
to
yeah.
you, and it's like, oh, okay, cool, thanks.
I don't get it. Unless you're making Lulu a physical attacker, which would be pretty funny, but yeah.
Eventually, once you make it all the way down, you'll come to a Y, and it'll just kind of start playing some scenes where Tidus is basically like, "Are we there yet?" kind of a deal, and they're like, "Nope, we gotta go Moonflow, Guadasalami, Thunder Plains, la la la," and he's like, "Oh
And then the Temple of
boy," he's like,
Makalani,
"Oh, this is taking so long."
yeah. My favorite part too is we can't just skip all of that, can we?
He's like, "Can we just
Yeah,
go
let's
there?"
just skip it.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. And, you know, through all that, you know, I think it's like maybe Waka that's rattling off the journey and stuff. And then, you know, one of our favorite growing up is, you know, but first, before that, we get to pray in the temple of Djose. And it's like, oh boy.
Jose.
Can you not just be so rosy all the time, all right? It's really putting a damper on my dark mood. I want to be in a dark mood right now. Can you just let that happen?
Yeah, exactly. But kind of like what you're saying, we find out a little bit more about what is a summoner's training. And so after Titus said, you know, we can't just skip all of that, apparently not, because part of this journey is in order to defeat sin, essentially at this point, the summoner has to pray at every single temple and acquire every single Aeon.
Yeah, and it's to prepare mind and body for it, and so for the final Aeon.
Yeah.
So apparently, this final Aeon,
Right.
this is, you know, you have to be prepared for it, and you can't
Yeah.
just go straight there. Otherwise, I guess maybe you just wouldn't be able to do it or handle it or something. Another pretty funny part is as they're walking, you know, you're going along, do, and Oren's like, "Hey, new guy, me?"
What can I do for you,
Well,
boss?
no, he's like, "Me?" He's like, "Who else?" It's like, yeah, Tidus, who else, man? You're the new guy, dummy. Come on.
Yeah, I know. It's like, no, I'm talking to the guy right next to you. I'm looking right at you.
Yeah, it's like you're the new guy. But he does stress the point of he's like, don't tell Yuna about Jecht being
Mm.
Sin. You know, he's like, out of
Mhm.
pretty much out of everyone, Tidus like, no one's believed me, but he's like, Yuna would. You know, right out of
Yeah.
everyone, Yuna would believe you. And just knowing
Mhm.
that, Oren feels that she would distance herself from him. And of course, we can't be having that because, you know, Tidus clearly has a very important role in defeating Sin this time with Jecht. Because I mean,
Yeah.
think about it, Jecht brought Tidus here specifically for this, right? So,
Tidus was like, "You know what? Come to think about it, did I even need to know?"
oh yeah, yeah.
And then Orin, yeah, Orin is just like, "Well, better you find out now than at a critical time and becoming emotional." And that's when
Me?
Tidus,
Emotional?
"Me? Emotional? I heard you were quite the crybaby."
Quite the crybaby. He's like, well, maybe when I was a kid, maybe
Yeah.
now a little, I guess. So it's like, he's
Maybe.
like, okay, so you're even admitting you're
Well,
still a crybaby.
he is only 17,
Yeah, well,
but
that
yeah,
is
it
that
is
is
kind
the
of
weird
funny.
thing when you think about that the
Yeah.
actual age they make these characters and stuff. But you will go forward, and really the only people on this next kind of little strip is you will see Lucille, Elma, and Clasco. And if you talk to them, you'll learn that like the Chocobo Knights were pretty much all decimated. They may be the last three, if not, there's not very more than that. And then not only that, but literally all of the Chocobos, except for the one Lucille's riding on, got wiped out. The whopping company of 10 got wiped out with the whopping company of Crusaders of 12. You know, it was a dark
Oh,
day
man.
for the armies of Spira. All 50 of them died. I mean, it just kind of drives. So it's like, this is really a pathetic force, man. You guys have all of these people in Luca, and yet your armies are like nobody. You got Blitzball teams are larger than the Crusaders now, essentially.
And best part, I mean, one of the things I love about Final Fantasy X too is it's the sound effects and everything. Like if you go and talk to the chocobo, it's like
Yeah, yeah, just like
it like
whines.
does a little noise.
Like,
Yeah.
and the kind of feeling that you're getting still. So based on what they're saying, I think Lucille even says like, or maybe it was Alma, like we should have never, turned from the teachings, kind of a deal. And if you talk to again all the Crusaders, you're coming down, you'll hear the same thing. But the common theme is that essentially the failure happened. The failure only happened because they turned their backs on the teachings.
Yeah.
No, the
Yeah.
failing happened because you guys took a squirt gun to a flamethrower fight. I mean, like that's kind of why you failed. It had nothing to do with the teachings here.
Yeah, and this is going to become amplified, right? This theme of the teachings of Yevon and the Temple, the Crusaders. Obviously, this has become a thing since really Mi'ihen.
Yeah,
We started learning about Operation Mi'ihen. We started learning about the Forbidden Machina, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, this is going to be interesting because that's kind of what the consensus is in Spira is that the only way to defeat sin is through the summoners and the teachings. And, so far, apparently, the Forbidden Machina hasn't been good enough to do it.
yeah. And then the last little bit that we'll cover here is if you do even go forward, we get a look at Djose Temple, and as they're walking up, it actually, dude, it looks pretty sweet. It's like solid stone looking, but then it starts to crack open and lightning, and it separates and starts like orbiting around,
Yep.
and you learn that means that there's a summoner inside praying. It's Ty's like, what if it's Donna? It's like, well, let's hope it's not. But so you know that another summoner's there, and Yuna kind of like gets like a pep in her step from it. So you almost kind of learn like this is almost kind of like a race. Which summoner can
Yeah.
get to the end and kill Sin first is kind of what it is. And it kind of almost seems like if you don't get it, you're disgraced. It's like, you're not a good summoner.
Yeah, it's a bit like coming in second place, right? You just get forgotten.
And so there is a safe sphere there. We saved it, and that's that. We thank you all for hanging out with us, listening to the episode. We're, of course, making great headway. We're really enjoying it. As always, you can go to FinalFantasyTalks.com. It's our website. We just got some stuff there. Also, our Instagram, all the same handle, and just check out, hop in the conversation, make some comments, do whatever, all the fun stuff. And also something real cool that we have coming your way is the next episode we are going to take just a small little tiny break. We're going to do an episode on Blitzball. So we're going to kind of start sprinkling these in. Not very often, because we know that it might not be everyone's cup of tea, but there'll be shorter episodes and we'll just kind of put them in every once in a while because Alex and I, we just can't contain ourselves anymore, man. We got to do it.
Man. Yeah, and we're going to be mainly talking about, some of the characters or some of the players that you can recruit along the way thus far to try and kind of tie it into the story. We're not really going to, be talking about a bunch of players you haven't seen at this point or anything like
Yeah.
that. And just in general, where you would likely be at this point in the game in terms of Blitzball.
Yep. We'll talk strategy. We'll talk, just kind of our personal favorite players and different formations. And, maybe we'll just go through some basic tactics that, it might be some things we've already talked about, but we just figure it'll be a lot easier to just kind of dedicate episodes to that rather than taking up a lot of time in kind of the usual ones with Blitzball. And so we're really looking forward to it. We hope you guys will enjoy it. It'll be a good time for us. We just love Blitzball so much. It's so much
Yeah,
fun.
exactly. We're itching to talk about it.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening again, and we'll catch you next time. I'm Mark,
I'm Alex.
and this is Final Stop for Final Fantasy Talks.